Hello, welcome back to the NFL DFS slate breakdown for Monday Night Football. We got the 49ers at the Vikings. Should be an interesting game. We do have some injury stuff to go over, which obviously changes the slate a little bit. So I think the slate is interesting. Whenever we do have these injury situations, it brings up some interesting questions, so we're going to go over that. But before we do, come join us at LineStar. It is $39.99 per month, and it gets you access to everything we do. All the props, all the DFS for all the sports we cover. Best deal around. Lock it in now. We got basketball starting tomorrow. It's the best time to get involved. Now, let's get into some fun. So, we are going to go over the ownership and the matchups for all of the positions. And we will start off with, not that game. The single game, San Francisco at Minnesota. Per usual, quarterbacks are the highest owned, so we will skip that and we will get to the flex. We got Ayuk and Kittle with the two highest ownerships. Then Brandon Powell and Jordan Addison, followed by TJ Hawkinson. So, what I want to start off with is, that is on FanDuel. Let me get to DraftKings a little bit here. I already have the DraftKings or the FanDuel one over here, I believe. Yep. All right. So, start over here. Ownership. We got Addison and Hawkinson as the two highest owned, then Kittle, Ayuk, Osborne. So those are all the over 50% owned guys, and you're going to need a couple of those guys for sure. One thing that I will say is I think Brandon Ayuk is in a great spot. He is a little bit pricey. That's why his ownership isn't any higher. And then George Kittle. Anytime that Debo or Ayuk is out, Kittle generally gets a lot more work. One thing I will say with that is that Trent Williams is going to be out today. When Trent Williams is out, a lot of the times the 49ers ask Kittle to block more. He is one of the best blocking tight ends in the game, and when they lose their offensive tackle, Kittle's asked to do a little bit more. So in this situation, I am a little bit wary of with Trent Williams out, of Kittle blocking more. Now, the alternative side of that is that Debo's out, and so he could get more targets. So I think it's a very interesting spot. And so far this year, we really haven't seen him get many targets. 9 targets in week 3. 6 in week 1, 4 in week 5. So he hasn't been a target monster so far this season. So that is a little bit, worrisome. Now, do with that information what you will. Understand, you can use that so you fade him, or say that, hey, Debo's out, he's going to get more targets, and that's it. As far as Addison and Hawkinson, look, Justin Jefferson's out. They're going to get more targets. Hawkinson is just, you can pretty much slate him in for 8+ targets. It is a tough matchup for him, but the targets are going to be there. On Addison's side, he didn't get an uptick in targets the last game out. They did struggle a little bit against the Bears, but he is a guy that is in that 6 to 9 target range weekly. And if there's a guy that goes into double-digit targets, my money would be on Addison. Could be KJ Osborne, who, is in that 3 to, say, 6 target range generally. But once again, JJ's out, so a little bit of a boost for Osborne there. Brandon Powell is the first of the lower owned guys getting some love and lower owned. He is still over 30%. He had 4 targets last week, 6 targets the week before with Jefferson going out. So he is involved a little bit, but the only way he is getting there is if he gets a touchdown or he breaks a long run or catch. Can it happen? Yes. Is it likely? No. And personally, at 38% owned, I'm probably going elsewhere. CMC, look, yes, he's banged up. If you're getting any type of ownership discount on him, I'd be going all in. Think he's in a good spot here. He should do just fine. The only worry is that he's limited. Now, pay attention to news throughout the day. But look, it came out yesterday or maybe Saturday night that he was pushing to play, that he was likely to play. So it's not like this is a game time decision. It has already came out today. He is playing. With that, I think he's probably okay. There is a slight little tear in his oblique, which maybe that means if they get up to a big lead, you know, they're going to lean on, say, Mason or on Mitchell. But I think if they're in this game, they're going to use him a lot. And without Debo, there's some more room for those short passes for him, which is interesting. It also makes it where he doesn't get hit quite as hard or quite as often as it does from, those rushing carries. So maybe couple less carries, but more targets, which targets are worth more anyways, so who cares? Juwan Jennings, he always acts as their wide receiver 3. The one thing I will say with this is that it's actually been Ray McCloud to get the big snap bump when either Ayuk or Debo is out. Debo only played like 15% of the snaps last week. Ray played 71%. Juwan Jennings is usually in that 30-40% range. He only went up to like 53% last week. So while there was a big bump for Jennings, Ray McCloud got the big bump. It also happened when Ayuk was out earlier this year. Jennings got a slight bump, not a huge bump. Meanwhile, Ray was close to 50%. So I think we can assume that Ray plays 40+%, and he's fairly cheap. He also has, some big playability, probably gets a couple rushes, maybe a couple catches. If he breaks one, he's going to be optimal. At this low ownership, I think he's a very, very interesting play. Probably one of my favorite lower owned plays. Alexander Madison's there too. Look, he is their guy. I think that he played over 70% of the snaps last week. And this was the first week since they got Cam Akers that Cam Akers played less. I think they're realizing whatever was going on at the Rams with Cam Akers, that he's just not that good. There's something missing that isn't allowing Cam Akers to see the field. Coaches aren't happy with it. I don't know what it is, but there's something there. Madison is their guy. He is the RB1. I think there is some consideration with him at this, especially on DraftKings where it's point per reception. 7 targets last week. He got 7 targets versus the Chargers, 6 versus the Eagles. He is involved in the passing game and the rushing game. While I don't expect a huge game from him, he absolutely can fall in the end zone. He can catch 5 balls and therefore be in the optimal lineup. So I think he is at least interesting and something to consider. As we go down the list here, the punt plays, I don't mind Josh Oliver. He gets involved a little bit. He does have a touchdown on the year. Could get another one. Use check is interesting whenever they have injuries to the running backs or to some of the wide receivers. Maybe he gets used a little bit more. So this is one of those weeks where I don't think he's a total don't play. You can expect a couple targets. If he gets in the end zone, he could make you some money. Do I love the play? No, but he is a punt, and that's what we're looking down here is all punt plays. Ronnie Bell, he got a little workload earlier in the season. He has moved backwards into, wide receiver 4, 5 area, not getting quite as much work. So I don't really like him here. I think I would rather Ray even at that ownership. Now we'll talk about both Eli Mitchell and Jordan Mason here. We don't really know which one is the true RB2. I believe that it is Mitchell, but he's been dealing with some injuries, and we're not sure what his injury situation is right now. If Mitchell is a full go, he is the RB2. He started it and this season as it. He was that all last year when CMC came on board, and I think he still is now. If there's any news that comes out that Mitchell still isn't a full 100%, Jordan Mason probably acts like the 2. Now, I think both of these guys are in play, and there's a couple different ways. 49ers get up big. They're going to ease off how much they use CMC, and then Mason or Mitchell or both will get some play and a possibility to get in the end zone. So they're interesting. I think both backups are interesting, and I would heavily consider playing both of them. Just understand you're using those guys in a different game script. You're using those guys in 49ers are stomping on the Vikings, and you're waiting for some garbage time, points or touchdowns. Maybe they are used a little bit more during, the primetime part of the game than they generally are, but I wouldn't expect too much there. So that takes us all over those DraftKings ownerships. Now on to FanDuel. Ayuk, Kittle, Powell going too high owned in my mind. Addison at same ownership as Powell is crazy to me. I would be all over Addison at that, even at that price with that percentage. Hawkinson, Osborne, all of these guys are interesting. It is likely that the Vikings are going to have to throw a lot in this game, so you want some exposure to those pass catchers. Wouldn't totally forget about Madison. I like Ray. Juwan Jennings, told you the case for him. He does get an upside, but he's just not a game-breaking ability. Most likely, he's in that, 3 to 5 catches for 30 to 50 yards. So a touchdown is make or break for him to be optimal. CMC, look, I don't expect this ownership to stay, but if he stays this low, I am hammering CMC. There's just no way. If he's under single-digit captain ownership, I will be hammering CMC captains. I think he's, going to be just fine. Will he be a little bit limited? Yeah, maybe. But I think that's okay, and then we could still use him. And then on the RB side, Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, same exact thing as DraftKings. Think they're interesting. They are much more expensive on FanDuel, but I think there's still a pathway to them being useful. And at that low of ownership, they're absolutely interesting. So that is the rundown here. Let's go through the matchups a little bit. All right, at the quarterbacks, we haven't talked about the quarterback spot much, but this Minnesota defense started the year off giving up a ton of points to the quarterback. Mayfield had a good year. Hurts had a good week. Herbert had a good week. Bryce Young got crushed, but Bryce Young gets crushed against everywhere. Mahomes, 280 and 2. He just had an okay week, but they were able to move the ball and rush the ball just fine, so it didn't matter. And Fields got hurt. So Minnesota's been giving it up to the quarterback a little bit. I think Purdy's in a fine spot. And then on the other side, Cousins is in a little bit of a tough spot. The one thing I will say is they've only really faced one good passing offense, which was the Rams, and Stafford went for 307. One touchdown, had a couple turnovers, but 307 yards. So I think that Cousins is probably going to be just fine. Will he turn the ball over? Yes, probably. But I don't mind Cousins whatsoever. Running back wise, on paper, it looks like Madison has a slightly better matchup. I don't necessarily know if I believe that, just because I think it's likely due to a couple touchdown variants. Whereas Minnesota just hasn't given up as many touchdowns. Now, if you look at the yardage differences, both are pretty similar. It's a similar matchup. CMC is the better rusher. I don't trust that Vikings running game very much, but there is definitely paths to Madison's success. Looks like Juwan Jennings has a very good matchup. Wide receiver 2s have done well versus the Vikings, especially, Smith had a long play for a touchdown. Williams had a long play for a touchdown. And then Mike Evans had a long play for a touchdown. So the Vikings have got beat deep, and that's partially because they've been blitzing a lot more. So they'll have less coverage in the back. So Ayuk, Ray, Ronnie Bell, guys that can get deep, definitely have some upside in this matchup. On the San Francisco side, like I said, they've only really had one passing offense, and Tutu and Nakua both did really well. Arizona has been terrible. Both wide receivers did pretty well. I'm not fading this Minnesota team due to the 49ers being a scary defense. They are a scary defense. They're going to get after the quarterback a little bit, and that's generally when Cousins makes his mistakes, but I think the wide receivers are in a decent spot to do well. Tight end wise, Kelsey went off 10 for 67 and a touchdown, not that many yards. He was coming off injury though. And outside of that, nobody's really done much. People have had a hard time to get yards against Minnesota. And against San Francisco, they haven't allowed much of anything this year to the tight end. And they've actually faced pretty solid tight ends. So Hawkinson may not look quite as good as he has in the past. Then real quick, just do kicker and defense. Kickers are definitely in play. I think that the Minnesota Vikings will be able to move the football against the 49ers, but they might struggle in the end zone. With that being said, that makes the kickers a little more interesting. And at low ownership, they are interesting. The 49ers are definitely going to be able to move the ball. They're definitely going to be able to put up points. So the 49ers kicker is in play as well. Defense-wise, look, the 49ers offense is beat up a little bit. No left tackle. Trent Williams is out. CMC is banged up. And no Debo. So I wouldn't be that surprised if the Vikings had a little bit of success. And they're going to be pretty much unowned. So I think it is a little bit interesting to have some Vikings exposure. Would I have a lot? No. But I will make sure I have a little bit. On the 49ers side, look, it's one of the better defenses in the NFL. They are good at creating turnovers, and they can get after the quarterback, which that is the recipe for success for a fantasy point scoring defense. There's, a pretty good chance that 49ers get up big quickly, and if that is the case, it means more sacks, more throwing, more possibility for interceptions, and potentially pick sixes. So, I think the defenses are absolutely in play. It is only a 44-point game total. Most of the unders have been hitting all year long. Defenses have been getting into those optimal lineups during prime time, so I would absolutely still consider them here. All in all, guys, I think it is an interesting slate. There's a couple ways to get different, and we just need to figure out how it all works together, how that puzzle piece fits together for that optimal lineup. But good luck tonight. We'll be back later this week, and we'll be back tomorrow with the NBA prop show and I am going to be doing an NBA DFS show this year. I normally will not do 2-game slates. I'm going to do probably 4-game slates and over. However, because it's the first week, I will be back tomorrow with